In this video, we're going to talk about this instrument called the hi-hat. We'll get into why it's called the hi-hat in a little bit, but first, let me just play it for you. Now, as you can hear, there are lots of different sounds you can get out of this instrument. You can play it with your feet and get that sort of chick sound. You can close it and keep it closed and play with your hand. You can open it slightly with your foot and play with your hand. Or you can do a combination of both. As you can see, this instrument is made up of two cymbals, a top cymbal and a bottom cymbal, with a rod going through the middle attached to the pedal down at the bottom. So before we get into playing the hi-hats, let's talk about the hi-hat stand and all its different components and how they function. This is the most complicated stand on the modern drum set, and it consists of some things that we've seen before, like a pedal very similar to the bass drum pedal. It has a footboard and a heel plate and a bass plate, just like the pedal, but the difference is that this pedal is connected via a small chain here to the rod, which goes through the middle and is attached to a spring. That spring allows it to pop back up after you press it down. Now, just like the other stands we've seen, this is a three-legged tripod stand. So you can set it in the position of where you would normally play it. Make sure it's right where your foot is going to be when you're at that 10 and 12 position. And then you can start putting the stand together. This is called the upper pull rod, and it screws right into the bottom part of the rod. They designed it this way because if it was one rod, it would be a little too long to fit into a hardware bag. And then next is the upper post, and you put this on over the rod and make sure it comes through just like that. We'll discuss adjusting the height of the stand in just a second, but I want to talk about how important these little pieces are. So this washer goes first, and that's the washer that you use to adjust the level of the bottom hi-hat with this wing nut. And it is ever so important that you have this little felt, because if you put the cymbal directly on the washer, or even worse, directly on here, this is going to dig into it and you're going to potentially have some problems. Hi-hat cymbals have a top cymbal and a bottom cymbal. Generally, the bottom cymbal is a little bit heavier to give you a little bit more definition in the chick sound when you play with your foot. And then the top cymbal is generally a little bit thinner so that you get a little more definition when you're playing it with the stick. So you put the bottom cymbal on first, right over the rod, and just seat it like that. This is the hi-hat clutch. This is often the most confusing piece of gear on the entire drum set. So let's look carefully at how it's designed. So it has a top part and a bottom part, and it has two felts. Now, the cymbal needs to go in between those two felts. This is incredibly important because you want the felts to be touching the cymbal, not the metal, okay? So you just make sure the top part is on the top of the cymbal, like this, and then once you get it in there, you just screw the bottom part on, like this. This particular clutch has an option to use a drum key to lock it in place. You don't have to do that. And then the other thing that can be adjusted is the top part of the clutch. This is only an adjustment for how much pressure you want those felts to have on the cymbal and how much you want it to be able to move or not move. So then you just put it on the rod. Now, regarding the height of the hi-hat cymbals, that adjustment is made here with this wing nut, and you can drop them down or raise them up. A couple things to be aware of here. If the cymbals are too low, you're going to have trouble playing them with your right hand because you're going to get in the way with your left hand. Now, if they're too high, you have the problem of you're going to be coming at them from an angle. It's going to chew up your drumsticks, and it might even potentially damage the cymbals. So you want them at somewhere where you'll be able to get at them with the right or the left hand, and you can play with the tip of the stick pretty easily or with the shoulder of the stick. Now let's talk about the spacing between the hi-hat cymbals. To lock your clutch into place, you can simply just press down on the pedal with your foot and then lock it in. You want to ideally have about an inch of space in between the two cymbals. That way you get enough play to be able to play it with your feet and get a good chick, and you can also get a good sizzle sound with the stick. If you have it too close together like this, you won't really be able to get a sound with your foot. And if it's too far apart, you're just moving way too much, and then you might have trouble playing the cymbals close together. Now let's discuss playing the hi-hats with the sticks. Most drummers play in a right hand over left hand position. Now, some drummers play this way, which we call open-handed. Primarily left-handed drummers play that way. But today we're just going to talk about right hand over left hand. Now, we discussed these grips of American, German. If you play with the American grip, it's pretty easy to just put your right hand over your left, and then when you're playing both at the same time, they just sort of move out of the way of each other. See how they move right out of the way of each other? So you don't really have to worry so much about those hitting. So we're playing with the tip of the stick on the top of the cymbal to get this type of a sound, as opposed to the shoulder on the edge, which sounds like this. So right now, tip on the top, and then we're going to add the bass drum in, and we're going to play our first drum beat, which is 1 and 3 on the bass drum, 2 and 4 on the snare drum, and all 4 quarter notes on the hi-hat. Sounds like this. 1, 2, ready, go. Now we're going to play that beat along with some music. So again, make sure that your hands are relaxed, you're using this grip with your fulcrum, you're loose, and then also you need to have a little bit of pressure on the hi-hats to be able to get that tight sound, but you don't have to lean into them or press really hard down. Just the weight of your leg and your foot relaxed should be enough to get the right sound. So I'm going to count you in, and we're going to play along with this track. So here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. Now we're going to play another groove along with the track, except this time we're going to release the pressure just a little bit from the foot, allowing those cymbals to just come a tiny little bit apart so that they can slosh together and get a looser, open hi-hat sound. So I'll count you in again, and we'll play along with it. Again, this is a pretty loud sound, so you don't have to bash the cymbals very hard to get that sound. But one way you can get that sound to be real articulate and clean is by playing on the shoulder of the stick as opposed to the tip. So we'll play the shoulder on a slightly opened hat, same groove, slightly faster tempo along with this track. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. So now I want you to listen to a bunch of different types of music and try to see if you can hear by the sound of the hi-hat what the drummer might be doing. Is it a really articulate sound? If it is, it's probably the tip of the stick on the top of the hi-hat. If it's a little chunkier sound, it's probably the shoulder of the stick on the edge of the hi-hat. Are the hi-hats sloshy? How open are they, right? So when you're listening to music now, pay attention to those elements. It'll help you get an ear for the sounds that you like to make on the hi-hat. Now we're going to play that same groove at a faster tempo along with the track, and it's going to be louder. I'm going to be playing a little harder. Pay attention to the way my hands are moving and not running into each other, right? And I will also play with the heel up on the bass drum. So here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. As you can see, this is a pretty versatile groove. If you're able to change the sound that you get out of the hi-hats, you can really change the feel and the sound of the groove and of the music. Now we're going to add one more element to change this groove up just a little bit, and we're going to play the bass drum on all 4 beats. This groove actually has a name. It's referred to as 4 on the floor. So now we're playing the bass drum on all 4 beats, the snare drum on 2 and 4, and the hi-hat on all 4 beats. So the backbeat, 2 and 4, is going to have the bass drum, snare drum, and hi-hat all on it. So it's a little bit challenging to get all 3 of those limbs right together. So try to stay right together with those. Let me demonstrate what a 4 on the floor groove sounds like before we play it with a tune. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. Now let's plug that in with a tune. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. So these 2 grooves are actually fairly similar, but when they're put in the context of the music, they can have a totally different feel. Listen to some different types of music and see if you can identify some music where the bass drum is primarily on 1 and 3, and pay attention to how that feels. And then find some music where the bass drum is playing all 4 beats, 4 on the floor, and see what that feels like. Generally speaking, in music that is more dance-oriented, the bass drum's going to be on all 4 beats because you have that driving low end coming from the drums. So it really does change the feel of the groove. Now your assignment will be to play these grooves along with a bunch of different types of music. There are some examples on the page here, or you can find some other stuff on your own. And I would encourage you at this point to really experiment with heel up, heel down, tip of the stick on the hi-hat, shaft on the hi-hat, and changing up your pressure to get different sounds out of the cymbals. And then also, now would be a good time to start recording yourself and go back, listen to is my beat consistent? Are my limbs hitting together? And then if you're videotaping yourself, are my hands consistent? Are my stick heights consistent? What does my foot look like? All that stuff. The more you're checking that out and aware of what your body's doing and the way you're playing, the better off you're going to be. In our next video, we're going to be talking about playing the hi-hat with the foot, and then we're going to add some more coordination in with four-way coordination and introducing a few rudiments as well.